Hi, welcome back to our Evo Skills Self Management Training Series. I'm Angela Tran, founder of Evo Skills, and this is episode 5, I believe, of our training series. So let's get started. So today's topic is about memories. And specifically how memories and triggers tie together to unlock our hidden, past memories if you didn't remember it. So, this is part of a series about self management, which is part of our meta skills framework. So, if you missed the last four, there was one about introduction to self management, what it is, introduction to self awareness, our evolutionary brain. And last week, it was about human needs. And this time, it's about memories. So, before I get started, just a quick disclaimer. The information provided in this episode is for general informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. By watching or listening to this episode, you acknowledge that the creator is not liable for any actions taken based on the information provided. So, this series is for you if you are looking to develop essential life skills or kind of moving to a new position or looking to change a career and you want to achieve greater personal and professional success, and also if you want to improve your focus or productivity. So, I always like to start with a recap of what was talked about last episode. Last episode, I went over 5 topics: Maslow's hierarchy of needs, tool of 7 primal needs, what happens when needs are not met, and how our needs ties to our core belief, and also a free worksheet called the downward arrow. And if you're watching this, there are slides. If you're just listening, I'll try to go over as descriptive as possible. So, as part of our meta skills framework, we define self management as the ability to manage thoughts and behaviors to promote self acceptance. Just as a review, we are still in level 2, which is C, mainly from a self management perspective. It's about self awareness. So, being able to objectively observe our internal self, so our body, our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. I haven't gotten up to level 3 or 4, which is the act of doing and then creating. So we're still kind of hanging out here to practice more self awareness. So, last episode, we talked about what happens when our basic needs are met. So, here I have 4 kind of main buckets: our physiological, so hunger, thirst, air; our safety and security; love and feeling loved and wanted, which is a sense of belonging; and then our self worth, which is of feeling success, feeling enough, and having a purpose. So if we've all 4 of these buckets, generally we feel fulfilled and life is good. But however, if we are missing one or a couple of these, we tend to perceive, our survival brain will start to perceive a threat. So here I have an image, 4 bubbles, and then I minus love. So at any moment, perhaps we feel unloved or unwanted, our brain will naturally start to think that we are in a threat state and we are going to kick off our stress responses, which is there to keep us alive. So you'll probably hear, especially from therapists or any type of psychology that you've studied, our brain tends to think of the negative, and that's typically because the negative kicks on because we're trying to fight for our survival, and it doesn't necessarily know we're being attacked by a bear or something's coming at us unknown, or in a current modern world where we're not really in that situation anymore. So this is just an image again, just to remind us that if we perceive a threat, our brain will kick off cortisol, adrenaline, so that we are ready to either fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and kind of take action. So the key point is if we perceive a threat. So we're learning to kind of observe that. Now, we also covered last week on the basic needs and core belief and how those kind are interrelated and could be formed. So, on the left hand side, and these are from the book Seven Primal Questions by Mike Foster. I do highly recommend it. It is an easy read or an easy listen on audio book. That's what I listen to. So, there's seven. In his book, he talks about seven primal needs. So, safety, security, love, wanted, or success, good enough, and having a purpose. So, if in our childhood, we were typically in our childhood, if we were responded to a no or maybe in any of these needs, it might kind of form a core belief. So, if I got the message, and this is a big one for myself personally, um, I would admit that I have abandonment issues. So I'm not loved or wanted comes up quite a bit. I would say, especially in my friendships and also kind of spouse relationship. So being more aware of that actually helps to not take it out on my spouse. So that's what we covered last time. And then we also had a free worksheet about a downward arrow. And this time it's just kind of adding a extra piece of it, meaning if I find my core belief, what basic need could it be tied to? So in this example, it is kind of in a corporate example, whether to share my ideas in a brainstorming meeting. I've been using the example throughout all the episodes just so you can see kind of the different ways of looking at it and applying different frameworks to observing your own awareness. So if I whether to share my ideas in a brainstorming meeting. So the negative thought that I might have, and this is true, my idea might be incorrect or wrong. So that comes up in my mind quite a bit. So then if that were true, what does it mean? It means that I will appear dumb or wrong. Then being wrong will lead to disapproval or rejection. It means that I will not be liked or wanted. It means that I don't belong and I'm an outsider. And at the end, I put I'm an outsider. So basically, it's drilling down the same question and then identifying, you're stopping where it starts to kind of repeat the same theme. So you can see for me, it's repeating that I'm not wanted, I'm an outsider. So probably the basic need for me here that has been deeply rooted inside of me is it's something with belonging, right? I'm not wanted or I'm not loved. And that, even though that might have been formed in my childhood, it's coming back up again in my real life work scenario where it prevents me from being my true self and contributing my ideas to a brainstorming session. So pretty fascinating. Now, this time again, this is just this spreadsheet the worksheet you can download. It is free and you can watch last week's episode on how to fill it out. So in this episode, we're going to explore the capturing of that memory and memories and how come it keeps coming up as triggers, right? How, like, for example, in my brainstorming session, why is my childhood memory or childhood event affecting my current state? And that happens quite a bit. So we're going to explore that today. So we're going to go over what is memory. We're going to go over the topic of triggers. And then another worksheet that I'm introduced is the stress triggers log. So let's get started. So I've never thought about this until I started researching and really understanding what is a memory. So memory, as defined in science or psychology, is the process of learning, storing, and retrieving information. It's vital human process that helps us solve problems, plan, and navigate. So typically there's four main steps or processes inside a memory creation. So first is gathering, which is taking all the input around us, encoding it into our mind, then storing it. Then when we want to use it or kind of recall it, we're retrieving it. So quite simply, it's kind of four steps that goes through our minds in creating a memory. Now, this is assuming the normal process, nothing is damaged in the brain or anything like that. Now, there are types of memory, and this is where it gets interesting to me, I think. So if we break down human memories, there's three main types. Now, you might see more depending on which research you read in science, but I've just picked one that is a bit more simpler so that it's easy to explain. So One is sensory memory that typically lasts seconds, which is really about our senses or smells and things like that. And then short term memory, which is for minutes, and then it gets converted to long term memory. So that storage process, which is generally could be a lifetime. Although I would say sometimes it doesn't feel like that because I am having a hard time remembering certain facts and things in the past now that I'm getting older and older. Now, if we break down long term memory, there's two types, explicit and implicit. So, another word for it is declarative or non declarative. So, explicit memory really covers conscious memory. So things like facts and knowledge was called semantic or episodic, which is our personal events. So this last week, I just went to a ski trip with my friends and family, and that would be a personal event that I remember that's stored in my explicit memory. Now, next to the partner to it is implicit memory, which is generally unconscious. This stores our procedural memory. So, like riding a bike or typing, it's not that when we hop on a bike again, we have to think too hard, right, to start riding again. It might, if we haven't ridden in a while, it might be a little bit unfamiliar, but pretty quickly our brain will kind of kick in and help us ride that bike. Same thing with typing. It's not like sometimes we're typing a sentence and we're reading it, we're typing pretty quick without consciously really thinking about it, right? We're able to read the sentence and type, and that's because that's in our implicit memory. It's very quickly accessible, and that it just kind of kicks on. Now, with that procedural and under implicit, that what I've described was procedural. Now there's the other piece, which is emotional conditioning. There's different words or priming like that. This is highly helpful in our survival instances. So for example, if you ever bitten by ants, like when I was little, I stepped into ant pile and it bit me. That's going to record it kind of closer to my implicit memory, which is also sitting closer to our kind of our fight or flight responses areas of our brain. So I will not, when I see an ant pile, I'll be very careful not to step on it and react really quickly. Or perhaps I watch a scary movie, and it really scared me, and in that fear, region, it'll kick off when I see another. In fact, this is true when I see or hear kind of the suspenseful music in the movie theater. I really start to get sweaty and my heart starts palpitating because that's how quickly that's how scared I was maybe the first time I watched one. So that is implicit and explicit. So I'll connect the dots after I talk about our next topic, which is about triggers. So if you've ever, it's always easy, I would say, to notice someone else's triggers, right? To be like, whoa, they reacted very emotionally strong to that comment or that action. And sometimes you're even surprised by it. It's like they turn into a different person, right? Even for me, sometimes, especially my kids can really notice. It's like, Mommy, why are you so triggered? So triggers are automatic emotional response or reaction to stimuli. So either event, place, object, thought, etc. It could be really anything that we see or even think or feel or smell. It's almost automatic, right? So it's going back to that implicit memory. So I have a picture here of like a couple arguing, and I feel like this is always, at least between my husband and I. Sometimes if you have a significant other or friends or even family, a sibling, we really know how to push each other's buttons, right? You'll hear that. And it's because these triggers are coming back up, which usually ties back to something that happened earlier in life, I would say, not always, about an event that our brain has captured in implicit memory. So how does this all kind of put together, right? So kind of putting together, how do we go from, which we covered last time, up the last few episodes, into triggers? So all of us, according to again Mike Foster's book and also Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is that we need a certain basic needs, right? Safety, love, physiological to survive. Our brain is happy when we have all those. Now, e- if at our childhood somehow one of those needs were met with a responsive no or maybe, our brains, and that could be a lot of stuff, as a child, right? Because we're looking from a lens of a childhood, which, we don't have the ability like ourselves now as adults to protect ourselves, right? Or to defend ourselves. So we're really vulnerable at that age. So if we even received a no or maybe, in our head, in our minds at that age, it's interpreted as a threat. And when that is interpreted as a threat, it may be stored in implicit memory for automatic retrieval, right? So, hey, am I loved? Right? If I asked, if I felt like, and this is a true one for me, just because, and I know the triggering event or series of events that happen as well. So when I was young, my parents and I was probably pre-K, pre-kindergarten, so maybe 4 or 5, because they had to work really hard. They had to put me, or leave my sister and I to live with my aunt during the week. So the weekday, and they would pick us up over the weekend. Now, my sister, totally fine. This event does not bother her. And I still remember to this day that for me, I remember not letting my dad leave because I was so sad that they would leave me there and not be with me. And he would pretend to sleep with, like, pretend to lay next to me until I fell asleep. Um, but I never fell asleep because I was so wired from being left. And I mean, it was fine during the week. I, kind of calm down, and then kind of the whole cycle will come again. So at that point, and it could have been earlier in that memory, I just remember being left and feeling really sad about it. And probably in my mind at that point, I was thinking, oh, they don't love me or they don't want me. In fact, those words come up quite a bit in my childhood. And I only know this because my sister points out, but she would not describe the event like that. So it's very interesting how different perspective and memories. So what happens is later in life, and this is also true, is that anytime, now that I'm married, fast forward years later, my husband would go, or leave for a work event, not even a trip or anything. I will perceive that event as not being loved and cause a lot of arguments that way, and kind of see kind of how those triggers work, because it's stored and so easily accessible because of that perceived threat as a childhood. It was just so quick to react that I can see it now, but at those moments in the past, I could not. Now, if we go down the other path, if it was, it's just like my sister, it didn't bother her, they were loved, generally those events are recorded into our explicit memory as episodic memory. So I can remember, hey, my sister will remember my parents left us at aunt, it was fun, we went to school, and then they'll pick us back up over the weekend. It was totally fine. Versus my memory is more about that not being loved. Super took me years to realize that. I mean, literally in my mid 30s to really make that connection, and my sister really had to. If she had not had the other perspective, I don't think I could see what was happening, that I was treating, my childhood self into my marriage, which didn't make sense. Because now I know now, and I can confidently say that my husband loves me. It gives me lots of love. It was just that in that moment, it didn't, back then when I didn't have this awareness, it did cause a lot of fights between us. So, I'm going to characterize a different one here. So, well, actually, it is, I'm not wanted or don't belong. So, using this example, what happened, how this core belief not only affects my marriage, but also in my other relationship and even working relationship. So, our core belief, as in the other episodes I talk about, can really, um, it's a pattern that our brain stores. And this is the interesting, and I read that when it stores kind of an implicit memory, it almost has no timestamp, right? If you're thinking, hey, I captured this photo, I timestamped it, I know when it happened, that's our explicit memory. When there's no timestamp, those patterns just keep reliving and reliving, right? And it keeps, so anytime our brain recognizes a similar pattern of being left or not being wanted, for me, at least in this example, then it will put me in a stress response, right? So if we look at this example, I'm not wanted or don't belong, can and this will impact me in a workspace where thoughts of sharing my ideas of being rejected. So before I walk into the meeting, I already have this thought. And therefore, when I get to it, the outcome is that I freeze. Again, that's one of the stress response. And I end up not even contributing to the brainstorming session. I'm listening, but I'm not contributing. I'm just sitting there because I'm so afraid in my thought of being rejected, which ties all the way back because rejection means that I'm not wanted, right? Which then goes all the way back probably to my childhood self. And I don't think, and what's interesting in reality is that probably because I'm not contributing, I end up not being perceived as not a team player, right? And which is also a form of rejection. But at that time, I can't play it out like that because I'm so afraid of that thought already. Now, it's another example with the same core belief, I'm not wanted or don't belong, is in my friendship. So, and I still deal with this now. So maybe a certain specific friend can't make it to an event that I planned. Then what's interesting, I end up fawning or friending. So texting praises to the friend over the next few days, wanting to be wanted, right? So it kicks off a different stress response, but I can see now that I was like, oh, wait, why am I doing this weird behavior or complimenting her so much or saying all these things? And it's because I am also in a stress state, afraid of not being wanted or not belonging. So, pretty interesting. So, I'm going to walk. So, we do have a worksheet this time. It says to practice observing. Again, we're in that C state of stress triggers and how it maps to our core belief. And the idea here is that eventually, I hope, or if you practice this enough, you should start to see a trend in your behaviors and to see at least which core belief is really driving your triggers, either in a work environment or personal. So here, this might look a little bit familiar. It is adapted from a previous worksheet about just stress responses, except this time I'm tying all the way back. So let's go through an example. Um, so low and a low level of stress level. So in episode 3, I talk about kind of low, medium, high, how to recognize those when you're walking into a situation, right? How to observe that and then really seeing what your stress response ends up being. So now I'm using similarly in a low response. So for example, a low one would be kind of like I said, in that I didn't contribute to a brainstorming session because I was afraid to be wrong. So therefore, I end up, I'm going to highlight this, that I end up freezing. So I'll highlight this, freeze, and basically I ended up, hold on, I ended up did not contribute. So now the downside of this is like after the meeting, after the meeting and action items, I didn't really agree what was assigned to me, but that's because I also didn't speak up, right? Assigned task, I did not agree with assigned task. Right. So then I'm asking, just like example I just gave, really what negative core belief might have triggered that stress. And I'm going to put that I was just so afraid of not being wanted or loved. Right. So you'll see, kind of put these into 4 categories that I talked about. Now I'm going to skip to the high. In this example, I might be, there's a meeting I don't really want to attend, and therefore made an excuse, or maybe not make an excuse, or coincidentally went to another meeting, and therefore coincidentally went to a lower priority meeting, and skip this one. So I was trying to really just flight. I didn't even want to deal with it. Now, unfortunately, in this situation, I really couldn't avoid it as I was needed in here in this situation. So the meeting was rescheduled. So avoid unsuccessful. So I'm like responding to the threat by just running away, right? The meeting is rescheduled until I can attend. So typically, like in a workplace, you may not be able to avoid this all the time. So in this situation, I might be perceiving the event as I'm not safe or secure, right? I'm really avoiding it. I just feel super threatened by it. I'm going to run away from it. So again, this is just a couple of examples to help you see or observe your behaviors to do that. Nothing to do with it. Remember, I say that I think, at least in my experience, I think we skip this piece quite a bit by not recognizing or being able to see what um, how we're reacting, our behaviors. So I think practicing is really key. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, which I think that is the last one. So again, if you're new to the series, I'm really big about adding tools to your toolbox. I don't think there's a one size fits all type of framework. I know a lot of people want that, right? But what I'm doing here is just introducing all these different methods for us to practice the skill of seeing, which, in other words, in a self management perspective, is self awareness. So, in this list now, I added to it, there's the new stress trigger log, which will be available today, soon after. We'll put it out there. And then tools I went over before: meditation, chain analysis, levels of self-awareness are the hand model, stress response log, 7 primal questions, downward arrow. So definitely check it out. There's tons of worksheets out there. And what's most important, just like any skill that you're learning, is practice, practice, practice. So all of these are available on our site at www.evil-skills.com/digital downloads. So there's free worksheets, and then also a version that you can fill out for a small price. So thank you for listening. And I hope you learned something new about memories. Now that we've gone from really what self management is to self awareness, and going from basic needs all the way to kind of our behaviors, there's one important part that I haven't touched yet in terms of self awareness, and that's our emotions. So I'll be covering that next week. We'll start to delve into that. Which is also a fascinating topic. So I hope that the way of breaking things down is it gives you a different perspective of learning about yourself and watching it. I know for me, this has been extremely helpful, especially in this time of transition. So if you're looking for a career change, which I have done, and really trying to understand our own reactions and having really a lot more control of how we feel and our behaviors on of yourself, I think this is a great series for you. So if you've gotten this far, please give me a like or subscribe or comments. I'd like to hear what you think. And do subscribe to our newsletter, where I will share the diagrams that I go over in these sessions and links to our downloads. So thank you for listening. And I hope you keep practicing these skills, because practice helps. And I will see you next week. Thank you.